Jake Morrison looked out the small window of the transport shuttle. His heart was beating fast as he saw the massive space station ahead. This was Nexus Prime, home to the Galactic Defense Academy. It was the most famous military school in the galaxy. Jake was only 19 years old, but he was about to make history. He was the first human ever accepted into the Academy's combat program. The shuttle docked with a loud clang. Jake picked up his small bag and walked toward the exit. His hands were shaking a little. He had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was here, he felt scared. As Jake stepped off the shuttle, he immediately noticed how different he looked from everyone else. The other new cadets were huge. There were Krillians with thick, armor-like skin that looked like it could stop bullets. Their muscles were bigger than Jake's entire body. There were Viridians with 4 arms that moved so fast they looked like blurs. And there were Zephyrians with large heads and glowing eyes that seemed to look right through him. All of them turned to stare at Jake as he walked past. Some of them started laughing. Others just shook their heads like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Is that really a human?" One of the Krillians asked his friend. He looked so small and weak. "I heard humans are the weakest species in the galaxy," a Viridian replied. "I don't know why they let one in here." Jake tried to ignore their comments, but his face turned red. He had expected this reaction, but it still hurt to hear. He kept walking and tried to look confident, even though he felt anything but confident inside. The orientation hall was enormous. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of different species filled the room. Jake found a seat in the back corner, hoping to stay out of sight, but even there, he could feel eyes on him. Whispers followed him wherever he went. A tall, scary-looking Viridian walked onto the stage. He had scars all over his face and arms. His 4 hands moved in perfect coordination as he adjusted the microphone. "I am Commander Ultrix," he announced in a voice that echoed through the hall. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy. You are here because you think you have what it takes to defend the galaxy from its enemies." The commander's eyes swept across the room and stopped on Jake for a moment. Jake felt like the alien was looking right into his soul. "Let me make something very clear," Commander Ultrix continued. "This is not a school where everyone gets a prize. This is not a place where we care about your feelings. Only the top 10% of you will graduate to become real defenders of the galaxy. The rest will be sent to support roles or kicked out completely." Jake swallowed hard. He had known the academy was tough, but hearing it said so directly made it feel more real. "You will be tested in every way possible," the commander went on. "Physical strength, speed, intelligence, leadership, and most importantly, your ability to survive under pressure. If you cannot handle the heat, leave now. No one will think less of you." A few cadets actually got up and left. Jake thought about it for a second, but then he remembered why he was here. Humans had never been given a chance to prove themselves in galactic military service. He was not just representing himself, he was representing all of humanity. After the orientation, Jake was assigned to his dormitory. His roommate was a massive Krillian named Vex Thor. The alien was at least 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor that looked like it was made of stone. When Jake walked into the room, Vex Thor was lifting weights that probably weighed more than Jake's entire body. "So you are the human," Vex Thor said without looking up from his exercise. "I heard about you. Everyone is talking about the weak little creature that somehow got accepted here." Jake set his bag down on the empty bed. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said, trying to sound friendly. Vex Thor finally looked at him. "I know who you are." "What?" "I don't know is why you are here. Humans are known throughout the galaxy as the weakest species. You have no natural armor, no special abilities, and no physical strength. You cannot even survive in most environments without special equipment. Maybe that's true, Jake replied. But I'm here to prove that humans can be just as good as anyone else. Vextor laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that made the whole room shake. You are either very brave or very stupid. I have not decided which yet. The next morning, Jake woke up early and put on his training uniform. It was a simple, gray outfit that was supposed to adjust to fit any species. On Jake, it hung loose in some places and tight in others. He looked in the mirror and sighed. Even the uniform seemed to be designed for aliens. Jake walked to the dining hall for breakfast. The room was huge, with tables that could seat thousands of cadets. Jake got his food and looked around for somewhere to sit. Most of the tables were full of cadets from the same species sitting together. There was a table of Krillians, a table of Viridians, and a table of Zephyrians. Jake didn't see any other humans. He found an empty table in the corner and sat down alone. As he ate, he could hear conversations from nearby tables. Most of them were about him. Did you see the human trying to put on his uniform this morning? One cadet said. He looked like a child playing dress-up. I heard he scored the lowest on the physical entrance exam, another added. They only let him in because of some political agreement with Earth. He won't last a week, a third voice said. The first training exercise will break him. Jake finished his breakfast quickly and left the dining hall. He walked to the training facility to get ready for his first day of physical training. The facility was amazing, with equipment he had never seen before. There were gravity chambers, obstacle courses that changed shape, and training robots that could simulate any enemy. Other cadets were already there, warming up. Jake tried to copy what they were doing, but even their warm-up exercises were harder than anything he had done on Earth. While the aliens lifted massive weights and ran at incredible speeds, Jake struggled with basic movements. When the instructor arrived, Jake knew he was in trouble. The instructor was a Krillian even bigger than Vextor. His name was Drill Master Corax, and he looked like he could crush Jake with one hand. Today we begin your physical training, Corax announced. We will start with a simple obstacle course. Anyone who cannot complete it in under 10 minutes will run it again until they can. Jake watched as the other cadets ran the course. They jumped over barriers twice as tall as Jake, climbed walls that looked impossible to climb, and moved through the course like it was easy. When it was Jake's turn, he could barely get over the first obstacle. The other cadets started laughing. Some of them were recording him with their communication devices. Jake fell down multiple times, got stuck on obstacles, and finished the course in over 20 minutes. He was covered in mud and breathing so hard he thought he might pass out. Pathetic, Drill Master Corax said. Run it again. Jake ran the course 6 more times that day. Each time was a little better than the last, but he was still far behind everyone else. By the end of the day, he could barely walk. As he limped back to his dormitory, he heard the other cadets talking about him. The human is even weaker then. We thought, one said. This is embarrassing. He should quit now before he gets hurt, another added. He's just making himself look stupid. Jake collapsed on his bed, exhausted and discouraged. Vextor looked at him with what might have been pity. Maybe they are right, Vextor said. Maybe you should consider leaving before this gets worse. Jake stared at the ceiling. His body hurt everywhere, and he felt like he had failed completely. But then he thought about all the humans back on Earth who were watching and hoping. He thought about his family, who had sacrificed so much to help him get here. And he thought about all the aliens who said humans would never be good enough. No, Jake said quietly. I'm not giving up, not yet. Vextor shrugged. Your choice, but tomorrow will be even harder. Jake closed his eyes and tried to sleep. He had a feeling his roommate was right. Tomorrow would be harder. But he was determined. to prove that humans deserve to be here, no matter how long it took or how much it hurt. Jake woke up the next morning, feeling like he had been hit by a truck. Every muscle in his body hurt from the previous day's training, but he forced himself to get up and get ready for another day. He was not going to quit, no matter how much pain he was in. The other cadets were already talking about him when he entered the dining hall. Jake tried to ignore their stares and whispers as he got his breakfast. He sat alone again, but this time he used the quiet time to think about his training strategy. Jake realized something important during his first day. While the other cadets were much stronger and faster than him, they seemed to get tired quickly during long exercises. The Krillians were incredibly strong, but they needed to rest after short bursts of activity. The Viridians were lightning fast, but they could not maintain their speed for very long. The Zephyrians were smart, but they seemed to struggle when they had to think quickly under pressure. Jake was different. He was not as strong or as fast as the others, but he could keep going for a long time. On Earth, humans were known for their endurance. Maybe that was something he could use to his advantage. That afternoon, Jake went to the training facility early. He wanted to practice the obstacle course before the other cadets arrived. He ran through it slowly, focusing on technique rather than speed. He studied each obstacle and figured out the best way to get through it with his human body. When the other cadets arrived for training, Jake was already warmed up and ready. Drill Master Corax announced that they would be doing endurance training today. Jake felt a spark of hope. This might be his chance to show what humans could do. Today you will run a 10-mile course through the station, Corax announced. The course includes obstacles, elevation changes, and environmental challenges. Anyone who cannot complete it will repeat it tomorrow. The other cadets groaned. 10 miles was a long distance, even for them. Jake, however, felt excited. On Earth, he had been a long-distance runner. 10 miles was actually shorter than some of the races he had run back home. The course started in the training facility and wound through different sections of the space station. Jake started at the back of the group, as usual. The Krillians and Viridians immediately took the lead, running at incredible speeds. Jake settled into a steady pace that he knew he could maintain for the entire distance. After 2 miles, something interesting started to happen. The Krillians who had been in the lead were starting to slow down. Their heavy armor and massive muscles were working against them over the long distance. The Viridians were still fast, but Jake could see they were breathing hard and starting to struggle. Jake maintained his steady pace. He was not the fastest runner in the group, but he was consistent. Mile after mile, he kept the same speed while the others started to fade. By mile 6, he had passed several of the alien cadets who had been far ahead of him at the start. The course included several obstacles that required climbing and jumping. Jake had learned from his previous day's mistakes and approached each obstacle with a plan. While the other cadets tried to power through with brute force, Jake used technique and efficiency to get through them. By mile 8, Jake was in the middle of the pack. The alien cadets around him were gasping for breath and struggling to keep moving. Jake was tired too, but he had plenty of energy left. He increased his pace slightly and started passing more cadets. In the final mile, Jake moved into the top 10. The cadets around him looked shocked to see a human keeping up with them. Some of them tried to speed up to stay ahead of Jake, but they were too tired to maintain the increased pace. Jake crossed the finish line in 7th place. He was breathing hard, but not exhausted. Most of the alien cadets who finished behind him were collapsing from exhaustion. Even some of the cadets who had finished ahead of him looked like they were about to pass out. Drill Master Corax looked at the results with surprise. "Interesting," he said, looking at Jake. "The human finished in the top 10. That has never happened before." The other cadets stared at Jake with new expressions. It was not respect yet, but it was not mockery either. It was confusion, then maybe a little bit of concern. Jake's roommate Vex Thor was waiting for him when he got back to their room. "I heard about your run today," the Krillian said. "7th place is not bad for a human." "Thanks," Jake replied, still breathing a little hard. "From the run." "Do not get too excited," Vex Thor warned. "Running is only one small part of training. Tomorrow will be different." Jake nodded, but he felt better than he had since arriving at the academy. He had proven that humans could compete with aliens in at least one area. It was a start. The next few days brought different challenges. Jake struggled with strength training and combat exercises, but he began to notice patterns in how the different species approached problems. The Krillians relied on brute force for everything. The Viridians used speed and agility. The Zephyrians used their telepathic abilities and superior intelligence. But Jake started to realize that each species had major weaknesses too. The Krillians were slow and inflexible. The Viridians panicked when they could not solve problems quickly. The Zephyrians became confused when they encountered situations. Their telepathic abilities could not help them with. Jake began to develop his own approach. He could not match the aliens in their areas of strength, but he could be more adaptable than any of them. When a problem required strength, he found ways to use leverage and technique. When a problem required speed, he found ways to be more efficient. When a problem required intelligence, he used creative thinking that the telepathic Zephyrians had never learned. The real test came during survival training. The entire class was taken to a hostile moon covered in ice and rock. They were divided into squads of 5 cadets each and given a basic survival kit. Their mission was to survive for 3 days and make it to a pickup point 50 miles away. Jake was assigned to Squad 7 along with 4 other cadets. There was Kira 9, a Zephyrian who acted like she was smarter than everyone else. There was Zex Alpha, a Viridian who was always showing off his speed. There were also 2 Krillians named Drock 5 and Gorth Miner, who seemed to think that strength could solve any problem. The moon was a terrible place. The temperature was far below freezing, the air was thin, and dangerous creatures lived in the caves and crevices. Worst of all, violent storms came through the area every few hours, bringing winds that could knock down a Krillian and lightning that could kill. Squad 7 started their journey well. Kira 9 used her telepathic abilities to map the best route. Zex Alpha scouted ahead to warn them of dangers. The 2 Krillians carried the heavy equipment. Jake helped with navigation and kept track of their supplies. On the second day, disaster struck. A massive storm came through the area much earlier than expected. The squad took shelter in a cave system, but the storm was so violent that rocks fell and blocked the entrance. They were trapped underground with no way to communicate with the outside world. Kira 9 immediately tried to use her telepathic abilities to contact help, but the rock walls blocked her mental signals. Zex Alpha tried to use his speed to find another exit, but the cave system was too complex and dark for him to navigate safely. The 2 Krillians tried to break through the blocked entrance with their strength, but the rocks were too heavy, and more fell down each time they tried. A few hours, all 4 of Jake's squad mates were panicking. Kira 9 was having mental breakdowns because her telepathic abilities were useless. Zex Alpha was running around in circles, getting more frustrated each time he hit a dead end. The Krillians were arguing about whether to keep trying to break through the entrance or to look for another way out. Jake realized that his squadmates were all doing the same thing. They were trying to use their natural abilities to solve a problem that their abilities could not solve. They were not thinking about other options because they had never needed to. "Everyone stop," Jake said firmly. "We need to think about this differently." "What do you know about survival?" Kira 9 snapped. "You are just a weak human. You cannot help us with anything." "Maybe not," Jake replied calmly. "But I can think about problems in ways that you cannot. While you are all trying to use your special abilities, I was exploring the cave system. I found something interesting." Jake led the squad deeper into the caves. He had been quietly mapping the cave system while the others were panicking. He had noticed that air was flowing through certain passages, which meant there had to be openings to the outside somewhere. "Airflow means there are exits," Jake explained as they walked. "We just need to follow the air currents to find them." It took 6 hours of careful exploration, but Jake eventually led the squad to a small opening that connected to a different cave system. From there, they were able to find their way to the surface. They emerged from the caves just as the storm was ending. The rest of the survival exercise went much better. Jake's squadmates began to listen to his suggestions instead of dismissing them. When they encountered problems that their natural abilities could not solve, they asked Jake for ideas. He used his human creativity and adaptability to help them overcome obstacles that would have stopped them otherwise. 3 months had passed since Jake arrived at the Galactic Defense Academy. The constant mockery had mostly stopped, replaced by curious looks and whispered conversations. Jake had proven himself in several training exercises, but he knew the real test was coming soon. Commander Ultrix had announced that the mid-term combat trials would begin next week. These trials were different from the daily training exercises. They were full-scale military simulations that would determine which cadets would advance to the final phase of training. Jake had heard stories from older cadets about how brutal these trials could be. Many promising cadets had been eliminated. During the midterms, their dreams of galactic defense crushed in a matter of days. Jake was sitting in the dining hall when the team assignments were announced. A large holographic display showed the names of all cadets divided into combat squads. Jake found his name under Team 7, and his heart sank when he saw who his teammates were. The team leader was Gorthrex, a massive Krillian who was known for his aggressive tactics and bad temper. Gorthrex had never liked Jake and had made several comments about humans being too weak for real combat. The team also included Nyx Prime, a Zephyrian who was considered one of the most intelligent cadets in their year. Nyx Prime was cold and calculating, and she had always treated Jake like he was beneath her notice. The other 2 team members were Zara 8, a Viridian scout who was incredibly fast, but had a tendency to panic under pressure, and Locke 4, a Krillian engineer who was skilled with technology, but had never shown much interest in combat. Jake looked around the dining hall and saw other cadets studying their team assignments. Some teams looked balanced and strong. Others looked like they had been put together randomly. Team 7 looked like a group of misfits who had been thrown together because they did not fit anywhere else. "This is going to be interesting," Jake muttered to himself. The next morning, Team 7 met for their first planning session. They gathered in a small conference room that was barely big enough for all of them. Gorthrex stood at the head of the table like he was already in charge. "Listen up," Gorthrex announced. "I am the team leader, so we will do things my way. The first trial is a space station assault. It is a simple mission. We go in hard and fast, destroy the enemy, and complete the objective. Any questions?" Jake raised his hand. "What about tactics? Should we study the layout of the station and plan our approach?" Gorthrex laughed. "Tactics are for weaklings. We are warriors. We fight with strength and courage, not with complicated plans." And YX Prime looked up from the datapad she was studying. "Actually, the human has a point. The simulation will be designed to test our strategic thinking as well as our combat abilities. We should develop a proper plan." "Fine," Gorthrex said with annoyance. "You can make a plan if you want. But when the shooting starts, we do things my way." The team spent the next few hours studying the mission briefing. They would be attacking a space station that was supposedly controlled by enemy forces. The station had multiple levels, defensive systems, and a command center that they needed to capture. The enemy would be controlled by advanced artificial intelligence that could adapt to their tactics. Jake studied the station layout carefully. He noticed several things that the others seemed to miss. The station's defensive systems were powerful, but they had blind spots that could be exploited. The command center was heavily protected, but there were maintenance tunnels that could provide alternative routes. Most importantly, the station's power systems were centralized, which meant they could be disrupted. "I think we should consider a stealth approach," Jake suggested. "If we can get inside without triggering the main defenses, we might be able to complete the mission without a major battle." Gorthrex snorted. "Stealth is for cowards. We are warriors. We fight our enemies face to face. The simulation is not about proving how brave we are," Jake replied. "It is about completing the mission effectively. If we can win without losing team members, that is a better outcome." "The human is right," X Prime said. "Our success will be measured by mission completion, not by how much fighting we do." Gorthrex looked angry, but he did not argue further. The team spent the rest of the day developing two plans. The first was Gorthrex's direct assault approach. The second was Jake's stealth infiltration plan. They would decide which one to use based on the situation they encountered. The day of the first trial arrived. Team 7 was transported to a massive simulation chamber that could create realistic environments using holographic technology. When they materialized inside the chamber, they found themselves floating in space near a large, rotating station. The station was impressive and intimidating. It was easily the size of a small city, with multiple levels and defensive platforms. Jake could see weapon systems tracking their approach and sensor arrays scanning for threats. This was not going to be easy. "Remember the plan," Gorthrex said. "Over the team communication system, we dock at the main hangar and fight our way to the command center." Jake was about to suggest that they reconsider when alarms started going off. The station's defenses had detected their approach and were powering up weapons. Energy bolts started flying toward their small assault craft. Evasive maneuvers. Zara 8 shouted as she piloted their ship through the defensive fire. The original plan was already falling apart. The direct assault approach was going to get them killed before they even reached the station. Jake made a quick decision. "Zara, take us to the maintenance port on the lower section," Jake said. "It is in the blind spot of the main weapons." "I am the team leader," Gorthrex protested. "We stick to the plan." "The plan is not working," Jake replied. "We need to adapt." NYX Prime was monitoring the station's defenses with her advanced sensors. "The human is correct. The main approach is too heavily defended. We need an alternative." Zara 8 changed course and headed for the maintenance port Jake had identified. The defensive fire decreased as they moved away from the main approach. Vectors. Within minutes, they were docked at a small, undefended entrance to the station. "This is just luck," Gorthrex grumbled as they entered the station. "It will not work for long." Jake led the team through the maintenance tunnels he had studied in the blueprints. The tunnels were narrow and cramped, but they allowed the team to move through the station without being detected. Jake's human size was actually an advantage here, as he could move through spaces that were difficult for the larger aliens. They encountered their first enemy patrol 20 minutes into the mission. Jake quickly analyzed the situation and realized that the enemy robots were following predictable patrol patterns. Instead of fighting them, he led the team around them using alternate routes. "We should attack them," Gorthrex whispered. "That is what warriors do." "Fighting them will alert the rest of the station," Jake replied. "We can complete the mission without unnecessary combat." Nyx Prime was monitoring the enemy communications. "The human is right. The station's defenses are still focused on the Main hangar. They have not detected our presence. The team continued through the station, following Jake's planned route. They avoided several more enemy patrols and reached the power control center without being detected. Jake had realized that disrupting the station's power systems would disable most of the defenses and make the final assault much easier. Lock 4 used his engineering skills to hack into the power systems. Within minutes, the station's lights flickered and many of the defensive systems went offline. The enemy forces were confused and disorganized. Now we can attack, Jake said. With the defenses down, we can reach the command center directly. The final assault was swift and effective. The team moved through the station's main corridors, encountering only light resistance. Gorthrex finally got his chance to fight. But the battles were short and decisive rather than long and costly. When they reached the command center, they found it lightly defended. The enemy AI had concentrated its forces at the main entrance, expecting a frontal assault. Jake's approach had left the command center vulnerable. Team 7 completed the mission in record time with no casualties. As they returned to their transport ship, Jake felt a mixture of relief and pride. They had succeeded, but more importantly, they had succeeded using his plan. Back at the academy, the results were announced to all the cadets. Team 7 had achieved the highest score in the first trial. Their stealth approach and tactical planning had impressed the instructors. Jake found himself being congratulated by cadets who had never spoken to him before. Not bad for a human, Gorthrex admitted grudgingly. Your plan worked better than mine. We worked well as a team, Jake replied diplomatically. That is what mattered. Nyx Prime was studying the mission results on her datapad. The instructors were particularly impressed with the tactical innovation. They said our approach showed creativity and adaptability. Jake felt a warm feeling in his chest. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt like he truly belonged. He was not just surviving the training, he was excelling at it. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. The combat trials would get harder, and the other teams would learn. From Team 7's success, the real test was still ahead. The final month of training had arrived, and Jake could feel the tension in the air. Every cadet knew that the final combat examinations would determine their future. Those who passed would become officers in the Galactic Defense Force. Those who failed would be sent home with nothing to show for their efforts. Jake had performed well in the midterm trials, but he knew that the final exams would be much harder. The instructors had been studying every cadet's strengths and weaknesses, and they would design tests specifically to challenge each cadet's abilities. The night before the exams began, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. His roommate, Vexthor, was unusually quiet, which was a sign that even the confident Krillian was nervous about what was coming. Are you worried? Vexthor asked suddenly. Jake turned to look at his roommate. Over the months, they had developed a friendship. Of sorts. Vexthor still thought humans were weak, but he had gained respect for Jake's determination and intelligence. Yes, Jake replied honestly. I think everyone is worried. These tests will decide everything. You have done well so far, Vexthor said. Better than any of us expected when you first arrived. Jake smiled. Thanks. That means a lot coming. From you. The next morning, all the cadets gathered in the main assembly hall. Commander Ultrix stood at the front of the room, looking as serious as Jake had ever seen him. The final examinations would take place over 5 days, with different tests each day. The final combat examinations will test everything you have learned, Commander Ultrix announced. You will be evaluated on individual combat skills, tactical thinking, leadership ability, and psychological resilience. The scoring system is complex and takes into account dozens of different factors. Jake felt his heart racing. He had always known that the final exams would be comprehensive, but hearing it stated so directly made it feel more real. Remember, The commander continued, "Only the top cadets will be selected for officer positions. The rest will be assigned to support roles or released from service. Your performance over the next 5 days will determine your entire future." A first day of testing focused on individual combat skills. Jake was assigned to Combat Arena 7, where he would face a series of opponents controlled by artificial intelligence. The AI could simulate any known alien species and would adapt its tactics based on Jake's performance. Jake's first opponent was a simulated Krillian warrior. The artificial creature was just as strong and tough as a real Krillian, but it lacked the unpredictability of a living opponent. Jake used his speed and agility to avoid the creature's powerful attacks while looking for weaknesses in its defenses. Fight lasted 12 minutes. Jake could not match the artificial Krillian's strength, but he could outlast it, while the simulated warrior exhausted itself with powerful but inefficient attacks. Jake conserved his energy and struck at precise moments. Eventually, the artificial opponent made a mistake that left it open to a decisive counterattack. Jake's second opponent was a simulated Viridian scout. This fight was completely different from the first. The artificial Viridian was incredibly fast and used hit-and-run tactics that were difficult to counter. Jake had to rely on his ability to predict patterns and anticipate where the opponent would attack next. This fight lasted only 4 minutes, but it was much more intense. Jake took several hits before he figured out the artificial Viridian's attack pattern. Once he understood how his opponent moved, he was able to set a trap that ended the fight quickly. The third opponent was a simulated Zephyrian tactician. This was the most difficult fight because the artificial Zephyrian used advanced technology and strategic thinking rather than physical combat. Jake had to use all of his creativity and adaptability to overcome an opponent that was designed to be smarter than him. The fight with the artificial Zephyrian lasted 37 minutes and was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. It was more like a chess match than a physical battle. Jake won by using unconventional tactics that the artificial intelligence had not been programmed to expect. After the individual combat tests, Jake felt exhausted but confident. He had won all 3 fights, which was more than many of his classmates had managed. But he knew that individual combat was only one part of the evaluation. The second day of testing focused on tactical thinking. Jake was given a series of military scenarios and asked to develop solutions. Some scenarios involved space battles. Others involved ground combat, and still others involved complex diplomatic situations. Jake approached each scenario the same way he had approached problems throughout his training. He looked for unconventional solutions that other cadets might not consider. When presented with a scenario involving a heavily defended enemy position, Jake developed a plan that used deception and misdirection rather than direct assault. When given a scenario involving a diplomatic crisis, Jake found a solution that satisfied all parties involved. The tactical thinking tests played to Jake's strengths. While other cadets tried to use brute force solutions or relied on their species' natural abilities, Jake used creative thinking and human adaptability to find unique answers to complex problems. The third day of testing was leadership evaluation. Jake was put in command of a mixed squad of artificial intelligences programmed to act like different alien species. His mission was to lead them through a series of challenging scenarios while maintaining unit cohesion and achieving objectives. This was perhaps the most difficult test for Jake. Leading artificial intelligences was one thing, but the real challenge was that each AI was programmed with the personality traits and limitations of different species. The artificial Krillian was aggressive and impatient. The artificial Viridian was fast but prone to panic. The artificial Zephyrian was intelligent but arrogant. Jake had to use everything he had learned about alien psychology to manage his artificial squad. He gave the artificial Krillian tasks that required strength and aggression. He used the artificial Viridian for reconnaissance and quick strikes. He relied on the artificial Zephyrian for planning and analysis. Most importantly, Jake learned to compensate for each species' weaknesses. When the artificial Viridian panicked during a difficult situation, Jake calmed it down and gave it a simpler task. When the artificial Krillian became too aggressive, Jake redirected its energy toward productive goals. When the artificial Zephyrian became too focused on theory, Jake forced it to make practical decisions. The leadership test lasted 8 hours and included 6 different scenarios. Jake's artificial squad completed all 6 scenarios successfully, which was better than most of the other cadets had managed. The 4th day of testing focused on psychological resilience. Jake was subjected to a series of stress tests designed to push cadets to their mental and emotional limits. He was placed in isolation, subjected to loud noises and bright lights, and forced to make decisions under extreme pressure. The psychological tests were designed to break cadets down and see how they responded to failure and stress. Jake drew on his human stubbornness and determination to get through each test. When the artificial environment tried to make him panic, he forced himself to stay calm. When the tests tried to make him give up, he reminded himself of why he was there. The most difficult part of the psychological testing was a scenario where Jake was forced to make decisions that would result in the deaths of artificial squad members. The scenario was designed to test how cadets would handle the moral and emotional stress of command decisions during wartime. Jake found this test emotionally devastating. Even though he knew the squad members were artificial, he had to make choices that would save the mission but cost lives. The test forced him to confront the reality of military leadership in a way that no previous training had done. When the psychological testing was over, Jake felt emotionally drained. But he had completed all the tests without breaking down or giving up. He had proven that humans could handle the psychological stress of military command just as well as any alien species. The 5th and final day of testing was the comprehensive evaluation. Jake was given a complex military scenario that required him to use all of his skills simultaneously. He had to lead a mixed squad through a dangerous mission while adapting to changing circumstances and making crucial decisions under pressure. The final scenario was a planetary invasion. Jake was put in command of a squad that included real cadets from different species. His mission was to capture a heavily defended enemy stronghold while minimizing casualties and completing secondary objectives. Jake's squad included Kiranine, the Zephyrian he had worked with during survival training, Zex Alpha, the Viridian scout who had been on his survival team, and 2 Krillian warriors he had never worked with before. It was a challenging mix of personalities and abilities. The mission began with an orbital drop onto a hostile planet. Jake's squad had to navigate through enemy territory while avoiding detection and gathering intelligence about the enemy stronghold. Jake used the lessons he had learned throughout his training to manage his diverse team effectively. He assigned Kira 9 to monitor enemy communications and provide tactical intelligence. He used Zex Alpha for reconnaissance and rapid movement between positions. He gave the 2 Krillian warriors tasks that required strength and direct combat skills. Most importantly, Jake adapted his leadership style to the changing situ. The news of Jake's unprecedented achievement spread through the academy like wildfire. Within hours, every cadet, instructor, and staff member knew that a human had not only graduated at the top of the class, but had broken multiple academy records in the process. The reaction was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and grudging respect. Jake woke up the morning after the results were announced to find his roommate, Vexthor, staring at him with an expression he had never seen before. It was not mockery or pity. It was genuine awe. "I owe you an apology," Vexthor said quietly. "When you first arrived, I thought you were a joke. I thought humans were weak and useless. I was wrong. Jake sat up in his bed, still trying to process everything that had happened. You were not the only one who thought that. I thought it too sometimes. But you proved us all wrong, Vexthor continued. You showed us that being different is not the same as being weak. You showed us that humans have abilities we never imagined. Jake got dressed and prepared for what he knew would be a very different day. As he walked to the dining hall, he noticed that other cadets were looking at him with new expressions. The mockery was gone, replaced by curiosity and respect. Some cadets even nodded to him as he passed, something that had never happened. Before Dot in the dining hall, Jake found that several cadets had saved him a seat at their table. These were the same cadets who had ignored him or laughed at him just days earlier. Now they wanted to sit with him and hear his thoughts on military strategy and leadership. How did you know what to do during the final examination? Asked Zara 8, the Viridian scout who had been on his survival team. Your tactics were unlike anything we learned in class. Jake thought about how to answer. I think the key was not trying to copy what everyone else was doing. I focused on using my human abilities, creativity, adaptability, and endurance to find solutions that worked for me. But how did you develop those abilities? Asked another cadet. Humans are not naturally stronger or faster than other species. That is exactly the point, Jake replied. Because we are not naturally stronger or faster, we had to develop other abilities to survive. We learned to be creative, to work together, and to keep trying even when things seemed impossible. The conversation continued for an hour, with cadets asking Jake questions about human psychology, tactics, and leadership methods. Jake realized that he had become more than just a successful cadet. He had become a representative of his entire species. After breakfast, Jake was summoned to Commander Ultrix's office. He had been to the commander's office several times during his training, usually to receive criticism or correction. This time felt different. Commander Ultrix was not alone. Admiral Kane was there, along with several other high-ranking officers Jake did not recognize. They all looked at Jake with expressions of serious interest. Cadet Morrison, Commander Ultrix began, your performance at this academy has been extraordinary. Your scores have forced us to reconsider many of our assumptions about human capabilities. Thank you, sir, Jake replied, not sure what else to say. Admiral Kane stepped forward. Jake, what you have accomplished here is bigger than just graduation. You have proven that humans can excel in galactic military service. But more than that, you have shown us a new way of thinking about warfare and leadership. One of the other officers, a tall alien with blue skin and silver eyes, spoke up. I am General Vex Corthan of the Galactic Defense Command. We have been monitoring your progress closely. Your tactical innovations and leadership methods have impressed our highest military analysts. Jake felt a chill of excitement and nervousness. He was talking to some of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. Your success here has had immediate effects throughout the galaxy. General Vex Corthan continued. Applications from human cadets for military academies have increased by 300%. The Galactic Council is reconsidering its policies regarding human military service. Admiral Kane smiled. Jake, you have not just proven that one human can succeed. You have opened the door for all humans to prove what they can do. Commander Ultrix picked up a data pad from his desk, which brings us to your assignment. Normally, new graduates are assigned to junior positions on established ships. But your performance has earned you something special. Jake felt his heart racing. He had hoped for a good assignment, but he had not expected anything unusual. You are being assigned to the GSS Endeavor, Commander Ultrix announced. It is the newest and most advanced ship in the Galactic Fleet. You will serve as a tactical officer, the youngest in galactic history. Jake was stunned. The GSS Endeavour was legendary, even though it was new. It was the most advanced warship ever built, with technology that had never been used before. Being assigned to such a ship as a new graduate was almost impossible. There is more, Admiral Kane added. The Endeavour is being given a special mission. It will be the first ship to explore the Outer Rim, where we expect to encounter unknown civilizations and dangers. Your human abilities, creativity, adaptability, and innovative thinking will be crucial to the mission's success. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again. He was not just getting a good assignment, he was being given a chance to represent humanity on the most important mission in galactic history. "I won't let you down," Jake said with determination. "I know you won't," Admiral Kane replied. "But remember, this is just the beginning. The galaxy is watching to see what humans can do. Show them that we are not just another species trying to fit in. Show them that we are leaders." The meeting concluded with Jake receiving his official assignment orders and information about the GSS Endeavour. He would have 1 week to prepare before reporting to the ship. It was an incredibly short time to get ready for such an important assignment. As Jake left the commander's office, he felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He had achieved more than he had ever dreamed possible, but now he faced even greater challenges. The success or failure of humanity's role in galactic affairs might depend on his performance. Over the next few days, Jake found himself becoming a celebrity at the academy. Cadets from all species sought him out for advice and conversation. Instructors who had barely noticed him before now treated him with respect and interest. Even the academy's support staff seemed to look at him differently, but the most meaningful conversations were with his former teammates from Team 7. Gorthrex, the Krillian who had initially dismissed Jake as weak, sought him out for a private conversation. "I wanted to apologize," Gorthrex said. "I was wrong about you and about humans. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment." "We all had things to learn," Jake replied. "I learned as much from you as you learned from me." "No," Gorthrex insisted. "You showed me that strength comes in many forms. Your mental strength and adaptability are just as valuable as physical strength. Maybe more valuable." Nyx Prime, the Zephyrian tactician, also approached Jake. "I have been analyzing your performance throughout our training," she said. "Your success was not luck or accident. You consistently used methods that none of us had considered." "I just tried to solve problems in ways that worked for me," Jake explained. "That is exactly the point," Nyx Prime replied. "You did not try to copy our methods. You developed your own methods based on your unique abilities. That is true intelligence." The conversations with his former teammates helped Jake understand the broader significance of his achievement. He had not just proven that humans could compete with aliens. He had shown that diversity of thought and approach was valuable in military service. Jake spent his final days at the academy visiting places that had been important to him during his training. He went to the obstacle course where he had first struggled and failed. He visited the cave system where he had led his squad to safety during survival training. He stood in the combat arena where he had faced his final examinations. Each location brought back memories of challenges he had faced and overcome. Jake realized that his success had not come from any single moment or decision. It had come from his refusal to give up, his willingness to adapt, and his determination to succeed by being himself rather than trying to be like everyone else. On his last evening at the academy, Jake sat in the observation deck where Admiral Kane had first spoken to him about his potential. As he looked out at the stars, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this point. 18 months ago, he had been a young man from Earth with dreams of serving in the galactic military. He had been mocked, dismissed, and underestimated by almost everyone he met. But he had persevered, adapted, and ultimately succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Now he was about to embark on the most important mission in galactic history. He would be serving on the most advanced ship ever built, exploring unknown regions of space, and encountering civilizations that had never been seen before. The responsibility was enormous, but Jake felt ready for it. The next morning, Jake said goodbye to his friends and instructors at the academy. Vexthor was there to see him off, along with his teammates from Team 7 and many other cadets who had come